Today, I'm going to be talking about identity and how it can really impact your future and what you do. So, the question is going to be, who are you really? When I say the word identity, I'm not referring to some sort of political ideology somebody identifies with or whatever gender that they want to pick. That's not exactly what I'm referring to. What I'm usually referring to when I say identity is what do you claim to be or claim to do on a daily basis. So, let's say you go to trade school for about 10 years, you get your plumbing license, and you work as a plumber day in, day out. If someone asks you, oh, what do you do for a living? Are you going to tell them you're an electrician? You're going to tell them that you're a doctor? No, you're going to tell them you're a plumber. But if you are a plumber and you also work for yourself, if you say, I own a plumbing business, fundamentally, there's a shift in the way that you're going to be perceived and also the way you're going to be perceived yourself. Something that I like to call the plumber's paradox. So when you're going to, let me give you a situation. When you're going to go meet someone, networking or otherwise, you're just meeting someone in general, and you guys are talking and it comes up in conversation, and ideally you are a plumber and you work for a company, but you want to do your own work and own your own business, you could say instead, as this comes up in conversation, they're like, oh yeah, what do you do for a living? Oh, you can either say, I'm a plumber, or you can say something more along the lines of, I own a plumbing business. The way this affects you in this conversation, in this context, is going to be that if they ask you, if they hear, oh, you're a plumber, like, oh, actually, I have a leaky faucet, or oh, my toilet's broken. Do you think you can come check this out? And you, as a plumber, might say, sure, right? And you get a piece of business. Or if someone says, hey, you're a plumber? No, actually, I own a plumbing business. Oh, okay, that's cool. Do you think one of your guys can come out to come check out this leaky faucet or leaky toilet that I have? Then that's a whole different conversation. And now you have a whole different type of framing. Like, oh, I could do this, or I could actually send someone who I work with, or I can come myself and say, oh, I want to do the job myself. It doesn't matter. This does seem very insignificant, but over time, if you really do want to be a business owner, you can't identify with the work that you do. You should identify with the work that you are trying to accomplish for the most part. So, I mean, this wouldn't really work if you're like a bartender and you don't own the restaurant you work in. You can't just, if you're working as a bartender and someone's like, oh, what do you do for a living? You can't just say you're a restaurant owner and lie. That's just false, and that's misleading, and that's just incorrect. And half the time, you don't really want to own a restaurant. That's not necessarily what you want to do. But if you are trying to be someone that has any kind of authority, or you're trying to build something and you're actively in that process, don't limit yourself to the job or what you do, because then that's all you will be. You will fundamentally not grow out of that. Granted, if you ask your unemployed friend, what does he do? He's going to tell you he's an entrepreneur, but he's just poor. So, there's like different fallacies with that type of logic. You don't need to lie to people, but also you should identify more with what you want to be and what you're trying to achieve versus what you actually do. So, you can't take this all the way too far and then just start lying to people about what you do, how you make your money, and what your skills are. That's not the point of this. So that's going to bring me to the next point, which this is a good way to frame things and to share and show your own identity. But also, when you do identify with something that also comes with it is usually bias. So when you're talking about investor bias, let's say someone's investing in a certain type of stock. Let's say one of the strongest communities in investing are dividend investors. Ben Felix has a much more comprehensive video about how, dividend investments aren't necessarily better, or they don't really pay more than regular investments like ETFs or mutual funds, even though they have, similar returns and they don't really offer the cash back benefits that dividends do. He's a much more, I'm going to say, educated advisor when it comes to that, and I'm not a financial advisor, but if I were to tell a dividend investor, hey, I have a real estate investment that is almost guaranteed to make at least 5%, but in this current market, we could at least get a 13 to 20% equity gain in about a year. He's going to say, oh no, sorry, I only invest in dividends. And his dividend portfolio has grown maybe like 3 or 4%. And that would probably be actually a really good investment. But instead of being curious and maybe trying to understand that investment more, you kind of write it off as something that you just don't do because that's not the type of investor you are. It's better to be curious and better to try to at least learn more about it before completely discounting that. You will miss out on a lot of opportunities if you are just a blank type of investor, if you're just a blank investor. But with this investor bias comes focus. So because you're a dividend investor, 9 times out of 10, that's what you're going to be investing in, and you will win. Over time, you will win as a dividend investor, and you'll likely compound much faster than if you weren't to focus on any single type of investment. But when you're really early in the stages of your investing, it's really worth it to try to learn more and try not to say no to too many opportunities because honestly, while you're this young, you don't really have a specialty and you can't really afford to be able to keep saying no to opportunities. It's probably better for you to try to be curious and try to learn as you're young and still developing your understanding of the world and how things work. A huge example of this is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett famously used to read a book by his mentor, and before that, he was picking stocks. He would talk about how he would try to pick a stock and try to predict what a stock would do in the future. And after he read Benjamin Graham, he decided, oh, I want to be a value investor because I want to invest in businesses that I think are going to perform better regardless of what the stock does. And historically, he's outperformed the S&P 500 by miles. So if the greatest investor in the world wasn't born the greatest investor, but was taught to be the greatest investor through trial and error, why are you any different? Why are you so much better and so much more informed than Warren Buffett? And the answer is, you're not. You know, your ego will tell you, oh, sorry, I only identify with this one type of thing or one type of business, one type of investment, and you will overlook everything. Now, Warren Buffett's also not the greatest investor in the world because he likes to talk about diversification when he's historically not necessarily a diverse investor. You know, he had Berkshire Hathaway, which at the time was a very poor investment on paper, and he transformed the textile business to a completely different type of business. So it's not like you can just look at Warren Buffett and say, oh, this is exactly how I'm supposed to do it. But that's just an example of how his identity didn't really get in the way of what his true goal was, which is to make more money. And he thought the best way to make money was to invest in businesses. And that worked famously for him. But that doesn't mean it's going to work famously for you. His choice of businesses usually consist of lower growth markets that are very stable. So if you're in a bullish market and you have an exit strategy or an exit time, you're probably going to lose out on more gains, even though through lower markets and bear markets, you'll probably perform better. So that's an example of how you can not let your bias get in the way and you can focus. His was very much a bias at first, but then he started to focus on businesses and the fundamentals of the business. Now, I want to talk about how you can take this and benefit from however you identify. So identity isn't just some clear-cut thing like I am this and I will always be this. Sometimes your roles in life change. You know, you're not always an investor. Like you're at your kid's Little League game and they're like, oh, whose dad are you? Oh, I'm no one's dad. I'm the investor. Like, what, dude? Like, you're a father. You're a father. You have children. You're a dad sometimes. To your kids, that's all you are. You're not a famous investor. You're not a celebrity. To your kids, you are a dad. To your dog, you are a dad. You're the caretaker. You're the parent to your animal. You're not just one thing all the time. So don't just have that narrow worldview, that narrow mind view. That's not what this is about. Sometimes you're an investor. Sometimes, you're a coach. Sometimes you're just dad. Sometimes you are just one thing. But the more closed-minded you become to actually trying to be receptive to new ideas and new ways of accomplishing goals and tasks, typically the lower, not ambition, but return you'll get on a lot of things, and you'll miss out on a lot of things. Like, If you want to go and do a fun experience, like one of your friends, like, I want to go skydiving, you can be like, oh, I don't do that type of thing. Well, why not? Do you have a cardiac disease? Are you just scared? Are you worried about the risk? What is it? Try to be a little bit more open-minded, and that's how you typically get to enjoy more things and really succeed when you otherwise wouldn't be able to. For me, when I was a bartender, I could have told everyone all the time, yeah, I'm a bartender. And when I was a bartender, yes, that's what I identified with because that's what I did for a living. But there were certain points where I was trying to have a business, and I did own a business. So I would tell people, oh, yeah, I actually resell sneakers, even though my main job was still bartending. And that would give me more opportunities to sell more sneakers to people who inquired about it. It's not necessarily like that was my one and only goal, but that's really what I truly identified with at the time. And it works. Changing your sense of identity, you don't have to change it every day, every night, every time you have a dream. That's not the point. The point is your identity is very closely related with who you are and how you're going to not just make money, but how you're going to move through life and the decisions that you're going to make. A lot of these preferences and type of biases that we form are really early in our life. Again, Ben Felix has another video with how people think renting versus owning is a bad thing. Like renting is bad and is always bad. That's not necessarily true. Like if you're a business person who has, not the most amount of capital, but not a little amount, like not an insignificant amount, and you want to build a portfolio and you want to try to take more risks in a business, take on more leverage, owning a house isn't necessarily going to help that cause because then you will be able to take less risk. You will also be a little bit more short on capital. And, if you do make a big mistake, you're going to lose on the house. And not just lose on the house, you're going to probably lose the house that you live in. And with that, instead of just losing a security deposit, you're losing a lot more than just that. You're losing tons of equity, tons of years of your life, and the home that you've identified with. So renting isn't as bad as long as you are investing in things that can equal the market rate, the market capitalization rate of buying. So don't just regurgitate information and say, oh, renting isn't bad, renting is acceptable. It's not always acceptable. That's not the case. You want to be able to do something comparable to how much a house appreciates in value. If you want to invest in stocks long term, do that while you rent because you want to live around the world more, you want to be more flexible with how you do things, then that's what you should do. But don't box yourself in, and also identify more with what you want to do, who you want to be, and what you want to achieve. That's pretty much it. Like what you saw, subscribe, and thanks.